I want to welcome everybody to this webinar about evangelism. Often a word that we shy away from in the church these days. But Derek Robinette is going to talk to us about how we can, as a church and also as individuals, kind of increase our impact that we have in our communities and with people. And so I am pleased that Derek has taken time out of his schedule to actually lead us in this discussion tonight. Derek has a passion for reaching the unchurched and is doing some really remarkable things. He serves on staff at St. Matthew's United Methodist Church in the Louisville area and is actually launching a new church, River City, and has been going for a little over a month now. Isn't that right?
Yes, we launched October 18th.
Yes. And so doing some creative and new things with that ministry, specifically to reach people who are not in the church. And so I know that Derek has some great wisdom to share with us tonight. So let's begin this time with a word of prayer. Will you pray with me? Gracious and loving God, we give you thanks that you love us and that you love those that don't even know yet that you love them. And I pray that you would give each one of us a heart for all of your people and that we would be burdened um, for those that are lost and those who are disenfranchised from the church, who are disillusioned by the church, that you would give us such a heart for them. And we pray that you would use Derek this evening to speak to our hearts and our minds to remind us of what we are called to do, and that is to go into all the world. And we pray that you would speak to us this evening regarding that. So we open our hearts, we open our minds, we all offer ourselves to you in thanksgiving for what you've done to us. And we pray this in your name. Amen. All right. I'm bringing up your PowerPoint. And actually, before I do that, oh, hang on. I was going to take me off. So hang on one second. There we go. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Tammy,
Okay, Derek,
so
I think we're
much.
ready.
And if
So whenever
something
you are,
goes wrong with my
you can begin.
okay. All right. Well, like I
Uh-oh.
said, thank you, Tammy, so much. And if
Did I
something goes
lose
wrong with my
you?
computer, just somehow message me. And no, I'm here. I think. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Can you hear me? I
Okay,
can
I
hear
can't
you.
hear
Yes.
you. Hang on. Oh, I think
You can't.
that was my fault. I'm so sorry, y'all. Try it again, Derek. Okay, I
Okay. Can you hear
can.
me now?
I'm so sorry. I muted my speakers instead of my microphone. So let's try this again. All right. How's that? Can you see now? Okay, perfect.
Yes.
So go right ahead.
All right. Well, like I said, thank y'all so much for being on here tonight, and big thank you to Tammy because I know that Tammy was just in Louisville up here today, and it's nasty in Louisville, so I'm sure it was not a good ride home. But we are talking about something I'm really excited to talk about tonight, and that is the idea and the practice of evangelism. And evangelism has gotten a really almost like a dirty word within our context as Christians, and specifically, I think, as Americans. And I think it's important just to claim that. And also, by the way, while we do this presentation, I normally do this in a classroom setting. So if there's questions at any time, feel free to type them in, and Tammy can get my attention. And also, if you have any ideas that we can learn from one another, we can definitely throw those in there. But when we think of the word evangelism, a lot of times negative things come to our mind. A lot of times we think of things such as door-to-door salesman. Also, we think of different things such as cold calls, or possibly knocking on the door and having to answer a survey about four spiritual laws. There's a great video that I encourage you to YouTube after this. It's called the Evangelism Linebacker, and it's a great spoof on why people don't want to share their faith, because we're afraid that we're going to be shoving something down somebody's throat. But that's not what I want to talk to you all about tonight. What I want to talk about is relational evangelism. And you can go to that next slide there, Tammy, that says relational evangelism. And oh, this okay. You must not have the right one. Well, just hold on there. I'll tell you when to go to that. But when we talk about relational evangelism, we're talking about something very different than what we think about when we think about evangelism in a negative standpoint. What we're talking about comes from John chapter 1 when it comes to relational evangelism. In the message, it says that God moved into the neighborhood. God literally put skin on and moved into the neighborhood. It's an incarnational ministry where God is dwelling with humanity, and it's centered. God entered our world and our culture on our turf. Jesus made himself physically and emotionally present with us so that we can learn from him. And that's important in evangelism, that we're physically and emotionally present with people. God and Jesus reached out and initiated friendship with us. And a key to any type of evangelism is friendship and relationship. God identified with us in every way and revealed who he is. We truly reveal who God is to people when we identify with them, and it becomes authentic humanity. That's what Jesus did when he entered into a relationship and entered into this world. So, any evangelism that I want to talk about and ministry that I want to talk about will be centered on this idea of relationship. And I want to start using a different phrase when it comes to evangelism. I want to start using the phrase of faith sharing. Um, when I throw the word faith sharing out there instead of evangelism, one of the things that happens is evangelism becomes less of a plan, it becomes less of an initiative, it becomes less of an event, and it becomes more of a relationship. Because if I'm sharing my faith with someone, what that means is that there's a relationship already built up, and that we have trust with one another, that if I'm sharing with them, that they would want to know about me. Whether with evangelism, it's something that I maybe even be forcing on someone. I have an agenda driven a mentality where I have to get something accomplished. Faith sharing is something very, very different. And it's something that I think all of us can do because all of us are called to do it. One of the misconceptions that we have about sharing our faith is that there are some people that are gifted with it, and they are the only people that are asked to do it. God tells us in Matthew chapter 28 that all of us are to go and to make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. And we think that a lot of times, that's a suggestion, but I always call that the 11th commandment, that God tells us all that we're all to go and to make disciples of all nations. And one of the best ways to do that is sharing your faith. Um, and I hope that you'll see when you share your faith that your church is a part of that. Now, we get a misconception when it comes to evangelism that the immediate goal is for them to come to your church. And I saw a few churches on here, whether that's Franklin First or Trinity Hill, and that can be a great byproduct of evangelism. But the real goal of evangelism and sharing your faith is that people would have a relationship with Jesus. And if people end up coming to your church, that's just kind of icing on the cake. It's switching from a church perspective to a kingdom perspective. Now, what I've always seen is that if you're the one sharing your faith, and if you are the one inviting, when people decide that they actually want to come to church, they're going to end up coming to yours. But it can't be the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal must be that we introduce people to the kingdom and introduce basically people to simply a relationship with Jesus Christ. I'm going to let you know, Tammy. I think I sent you the wrong PowerPoint, so I'm going to don't worry about. I'll tell you if I need you to go to a certain slide, but I sent you the wrong one, so that's my fault. So yeah, hang out right there, and I'll tell you if I need you to go which slide to go to there. Um, One of the things I want to talk about is I think as United Methodists, we are specifically designed, and our theology and our idea about things is uniquely designed to reach the current culture that we're in. One of the things that people today do not want is they don't want immediate answers. And what I mean by that is they don't want you to come up and tell someone how they should live their life. What are the 4 steps that they need to do to be right with God? Instead, they want to be able to enter a conversation with you. And if you look at our view of grace and the process of grace in the United Methodist um, view of things and the Wesleyan view of things, we look at prevenient grace, justifying grace, and sanctifying grace. And prevenient grace is a very important aspect when it comes to relational evangelism and faith sharing, because prevenient grace takes all of the pressure off of you and off of me. Prevenient grace says that God is already at work in every single person's life, and that God is totally passionate and so much more passionate than we are about that person coming to know Christ. So you may think of someone that you're hoping to share your faith with. Well, guess what? God loves them more than you ever will, and God is already at work in their life, and God is placing you into their life to help be a step along the way for them to enter into justifying grace, for them to make a decision to be a Christ follower, whether that is a quick decision or a long decision, and then to continue on and to grow in their faith through sanctifying grace as they move on to perfection, as we like to talk about, that hopefully we're all moving on to. So it's just this process. And I think one of the most important things for evangelism is that we get into a long haul mentality. Gone are the days where we take someone out to coffee, we share with them our testimony, and all of a sudden they give their life to Jesus. Those days, that is very rare. But what is very common are long relationships that add up to someone over time becoming a Christ follower. I want to tell you a story of a friend of mine named Josh. He was eighth grade. I was in eighth grade, and Josh was my best friend, and he would come to pretty much all of the fun things we would do at church. He would come to the basketball games and the lock-ins, but he never would come to anything that mattered. So I had shared my faith with Josh from eighth grade all the way through my senior year of high school, and nothing ever seemed to really click. But one day I was sitting in at my computer my freshman year of high school or freshman year of college, and I got this message right here that I'm getting ready to type. Josh typed me this message. He said, "Hey Derek, I got saved," and then I typed him back this, and it said, "From what?" Because I didn't know what he was talking about. I was assuming that he was drowning or that he almost got hit by a car or something. And he said, "No, I ended up giving my life to Jesus." And I said, "Well, Josh, how did you do this?" And he said, "Well, I read one of those forewords off the internet." And you've seen one of these forewords where they go on and on and on, and they tell you that if you don't mail this to the next to 10 people and then or 100 people in the next 10 seconds, then you're not going to go to heaven. Josh read one of those forewords and gave his life to Christ. Well, immediately I thought, I'm the worst evangelist in the world. How did how could this have worked for him and not what I've done? But he went on to say later on that if it wouldn't have been for me and some other people living it out in front of him, that this forward would have meant nothing to him. You see, we have to get into the long haul mentality that God has in mind for people. For God is at work in people's lives. If you want to go to the next slide, there, Tammy. Um, I think as United Methodists, we also have a very unique theology that sets us up for evangelism very well. When it comes to baptism, one of the things that I love about our theology is that we honor people's story. One of the things that you know about United Methodists is that we do not rebaptize people. And I think this is a really a strong stance that we have when it comes to evangelism. And for that, it's this. We look that God has worked in people's lives, and their experience of God really, really matters. And when we look at their entire story, we can point out that, hey, God has been active in your life, and also that when they come to Christ, when they make a profession of faith, if they were baptized as an infant, or later on in their walk with God, if they reaffirm their faith in Christ. I have a lot of people that are reaffirming their faith in Christ. Instead of saying, okay, you got to start all over and get rebaptized, and we can honor their past and say, look at what God has done to lead you to where that you are. The other thing is with communion. Communion, one of the very powerful things that we have is open table. I have been so blessed to have many people in my ministry that have been able to have communion for the first time when they've come to one of my services. It might be that they were not allowed to have communion at a certain church. It might be that they had not had some questions about God, and at that church they would not be allowed to take communion. But to tell people that they can come and take communion and grow in their relationship with God wherever they are in their walk with God, if they can confess their need in any way, is a very open thing. Also, holiness is a real point. We live our lives in personal holiness, but also social holiness. One of the best ways to share your faith is to invite people along when you're doing mission. There's a friend of mine that I have met in Louisville through a networking group. That she would never come to church. I would invite her to church all the time. We did a Touch Twice clinic, which is a free health clinic at St. Matthew's, and I invited her to come and be a part of that. And she came and because she liked to help people. Well, she came and she liked to help people, and she saw that us Christians were not that weird. And over time, she came to church, was baptized. But again, it was that process where in October she came to our clinic. It wasn't till January that she came to church. She saw someone get baptized in March, and then later on in June, she said that she wanted to be baptized as well. Again, we need to get into this long haul mentality. All right, so I want to kind of transition, and like I said, if there is any questions that you have, please let me know that we can. I can definitely address those. But one of the things that is so important that we do address, and yes, I do see. I'm sorry if I said anything that made me think that I'm all about women in ministry. So I don't know if I'd said something that made you think that I'm not. I'm sorry if I said that.
No.
So um, there are some resources that I want to run by you because I want to look at from an individual standpoint as we move into sharing our faith. There is a book called "Just Walk Across the Room" by Bill Hybels. Um, and also, there's another book by Mark Middleberg called The Unexpected Adventure. And I would encourage you to check out those two books. Just Walk Across the Room by Bill Hybels lays out in a pretty easy way how you can start conversations with people. And what it does is it gives easy stories over time that have helped people in sharing their faith. The Unexpected Adventure is a great book, and what it does is it takes 40 days and it tells you 40 faith sharing stories, and some of them are great successes, and some of them are horrible failures. Because one of the things that we're going to find is that so many times we make a total fool out of ourselves when we share our faith, but that's okay as well. And it's fun to just gather together and kind of laugh at with one another if we need to. Um, so when we're looking at our individual relationship with God, or our individual sharing our faith, one of the things that is most important for us to be effective at sharing our faith is having a strong relationship with God. Now that might you might be saying, "Wow, that's why they pay you the big bucks, right? To give us information like that." But it is so important that our prayer life and our time with God is very strong. Specifically, John chapter 15 says that we must be connected to the vine, and if we're not connected to the vine, which is Jesus, we're not going to bear any fruit. So I would just encourage you to spend time with God in prayer, and to first of all care for your walk with God over anyone else's, because you can only produce fruit if you're connected with the vine. But sharing our faith does start as individuals. This is not a church initiative. It's not your church's job to share your faith. It is my job as Derek Robinette, not as Pastor Derek Robinette, to share my faith with the people that I'm around. If you have a piece of paper, I would like you to do something for me really quick. If you don't have a piece of paper, that's fine. You can do this in your mind. But if you have a piece of paper, I'd like for you to draw a few circles on your piece of paper like this. Maybe you see it. Just got a few circles on there. And what I'd like you to think of these circles as are pawns, Ponds, pawns of influence that you have. These are specific areas where you spend a pretty good amount of time. For me, for example, one of my pawns of influence is a networking group I'm in. Another pond of influence would be the gym that I work out in. Believe it or not, I do work out. You can only see my head shot. If you could see my bicep shot, you might believe me. If you could see my stomach shot, you would not believe me that I work out. Another pond that I'm in, I can't tell if you're laughing or not. I hope that you are. Um, but another pond that I'm in is Wagner High School. I'm involved with the football team there and have made friends with the teachers and other places as well. Another pond that I'm in is my stepdaughter's field hockey team. I'm there on the sidelines every single game, and we've hosted a few parties. So, based off these four circles, and I'll type those out for you here: gym, networking, Wagner, and field hockey. I've identified those four places as those are the main places that I'm going to be able to share my faith in. And so, what happens in those places is that I need to spend a pretty good amount of time in those places. And what happens that's so strange in evangelism is we get nervous, like we're doing something odd. But bottom line, wherever you go and whatever you do, you make friends, you make acquaintances, and you at least get recognition from people. And it first starts off in each of your pond areas by going there on a consistent basis. One of the places that I'm currently trying to share my faith is with my gym membership. I'm in a gym membership that is based off of boot camps, and these are things where basically I show up and a group of us get our butt kicked by a personal trainer for about an hour. Now, if I go to that gym once a month, I'm going to have a very small impact there. But if I go to that gym 3 or 4 times a week and I build relationships with people, over time, I am going to have a stronger relationship. And I'm going to grow in that relationship with people. The other thing that's unique about the places that we go is that we don't just need to show up, we actually need to have some credibility when we're there. For the gym, for me, for example, I've made a commitment to myself that during the workouts for the first few months, all I'm going to do is pray and build relationships. I'm not going to invite one person to church. Why is that? Because I don't want them to think that that's the only reason that I'm there. It is a byproduct of why I'm there, but it's not the only reason that I'm there. And I also got to earn some credibility. I've got to, be able to show that I can get through a few of the workouts and maybe even drop a few pounds as well before I can really feel like that I can share my faith with them. This way, as I build relationships and I gain some credibility, we have some commonality in those relationships. And what happens is I go from someone that's just recognized to someone that they know to someone that they can confide in and be friends with. And I love what happens in these conversations. One of the things that happens is you start to truly ask questions and care about the people that you're around. A great book that I would recommend to you from a business perspective, but also from an evangelism perspective, is How to Win Friends and Influence People. It's an old book that maybe you have read for work or for school, but I would totally encourage you to read through that book. And a few of the things that it suggests are things that we should do anyway as Christians, but we so many times don't do. It's one of the things it suggests is that we become genuinely interested in other people. Become genuinely interested in other people, where we ask them, hey, what's your story? And what's even more amazing than that is when we ask them their story, we actually listen to what they have to say. People are dying to share what's going on inside of them and what is going on in their life. There's very few people to listen and to actually pay attention to what they are doing. And when we ask them the story, also one of the things that's important is that we talk to them about the things that they are interested in. For example, if you're trying to reach a group of guys that like Corvettes, on all of a sudden you show up and you start talking about cooking, immediately these guys you're less likely to reach these guys because what are they into? They're into Corvettes. One of the things that this book also suggests is a simple thing that you smile. One of the things that is so important as Christians is that we show that we're living life and life in all its fullness, and that this life is an attractive life that we live. Another thing that is so important is saying people's name. Learning people's name, that when you see them the first or second or third time, you know who they are. You stick out in that person's mind. And another great way to connect with people on a really uh, quick basis is to allow them to help you in a certain way. Maybe they have an expertise that they are good at and that you want to learn from them. Having them help you immediately opens up the playing field. So, what I want to do just for a second is, if you don't mind, if you would take the time to write out maybe one or two of your ponds and put that in the chat area so we can see where are the areas of influence that you have.
And Derek, while they are doing that, Mark had a question that you may want to address before our time is finished tonight. He wanted to know, are the different types of generations require different types of faith sharing? Like, would you share your faith the
Definitely.
same to a 20-year-old as you would a 60-year-old? And so, are there different
That,
approaches? So that's something I don't know if you want to
that's yeah.
talk about. Yeah.
That's a great question. And yeah, and you're totally right that different types of generations need different approaches. Also, I would say different cultures need different approaches as well as even sometimes there's an approach. There's some ways you would approach a male versus a female and have conversations. Specifically with millennials, which are people in their 20s or early 30s, um, it's going to be the long haul process. They don't want to necessarily. They're not as much as worried into the answers as they are into the experiences, into the stories. If we can get millennials involved in serving and doing and experiencing, they are more likely to get plugged in to the church and to have a relationship with Jesus as experiencing that by serving others. Um, I have found that when someone who is in their 50s or 60s comes to faith, it is a lot of times more of a knowledge based or a explanation based, a sermon based um, conversion, I guess you could say. And the younger generations kind of typically are more experiential based. So yeah, there's definitely a difference there. So good question. So I didn't see what were some of the ponds that we had. We said Park City Elementary School. Okay, the hospital where you volunteer.
There's
Okay, that's good stuff.
a
Well,
concert, a Con- Central Kentucky concert band that meets at
okay,
Trinity University. There's a Mammoth Cave and Diamond Caverns in the fire department, and then at workshops and conferences and conventions that Mark um, travels and also in airports.
great, great. Well, the reason that I have people point out these pawns is it pays to be very intentional. If we want to accomplish a goal as a person of faith, we have to be very intentional in accomplishing that goal. It's the same thing with evangelism and faith sharing is we have to say where are the areas that I can focus and how can I pray for these areas. One of the things that I do before I walk into the gym or before I walk into Wagner High School is I just say a simple prayer. I say, God, however you want me to use me today while I'm working out or while I'm providing a meal for the football team, Lord, would you please use me? And I've been so amazed at how many times a spiritual conversation will happen simply from praying that prayer. Another thing that I would encourage you to start to do, and when I'm encouraging you to do this, I would also encourage you to share this with your evangelism teams and challenge your entire church to do this. One of the things that I ask any member of River City, which is the church I'm planning to do, is to come up with a list of people. It can be a list of 5 people, it could be a list of 100 people, but I encourage people to at least do a list of 5 people that you're going to pray for on a daily basis and that you are going to make an effort in order to spend more time around that you might have spiritual conversations with this people. One of my friends that I'm currently doing this for is a friend of mine named Joe. Joe is probably one of the best people I know. Joe is an atheist, but he is an amazing, amazing man. And what I do is I pray for Joe on a daily basis. And I also intentionally, probably twice a month, find ways that I can just spend time with Joe and have conversation with Joe. And I've been amazed at how many times we've had spiritual conversations just based off these prayers. But when we have these direct pawns and we have these direct lists, we're being intentional and we're praying and we're scheduling our time with these people, and they're usually constantly on our mind. The other thing that I encourage you to do is to know the gospel. And that seems something that's very basic, but the gospel is how you have personally experienced Jesus Christ and how Jesus Christ has changed your life. One of the things that I would encourage you to do at some point, maybe this week, is to take out a piece of paper and to chart out your life from birth to where you are now. Some charts might be a lot longer than others, but we won't go through and say who would have the longest. And do it in this way. I can hold up a piece of paper here. I made a slide, but I sent Tammy the wrong PowerPoint. If you can see on the, this is what I'm trying to draw here is something that looks like a heart monitor or a mountain peak. And so this part right here would be a very good point in my life. Maybe that's a marriage, or maybe that's a birth of a child, or something that's gone very well, and I'm really happy here. But over here, in a lower point in my life, is something that negative that has happened. And what I encourage people to do when it comes to their testimony is to chart out their life and then go back and look at the times and say, where was God during these good times and these bad times? And specifically, what typically happens is there's going to be a time in your life when you have a friend that has been through something either good or bad that you have experienced. Maybe you've been through a relationship struggle, or maybe you've been through a loss of a loved one, and you are going to have a friend at some point that goes through one of those things and experiences that, and you have some wisdom that you can offer. You can say, when I was going through this time, my faith really helped me because. And I've found that many times crisis, sadly, is what brings people to a point where they're open to God. They're asking God questions, or they're willing to come back to God. And it's a really important time because it could also be a time when when they could be distant from God. And so it's important that we know the gospel, but it's also important that you know your gospel. And what I mean by your gospel is, what are those experiences that you've had with Jesus that are worth sharing? What are those experiences that you've had with Jesus that are worth sharing? And as you share those with people, as you pray for God to give you some opportunities, those will begin to pop up. But it's, again, being ready to be able to share and being intentional about working your ponds and your lists of people in sharing your faith. I want to transition now, and if there are any other questions, Tammy, feel free to get my attention. I started off focusing on our individuals because faith sharing starts with me. Faith sharing starts with you. And what could be the most powerful church in the entire world is a group of people who are committed to sharing their faith in the areas of influence that they have, that are committed to praying for other people, and that are committed to entering people's lives in those good and those bad times and saying, "Hey, this is where God is in those times." And if a church is filled with those people, you'd have the greatest church in the world. But here's what I'm convinced of: if a church is filled, if 10% of a church is active in sharing their faith, then you're going to have an amazing church, because it's going to start to catch fire. an opportunity that I would like for you to take and maybe take back to your evangelism team or to another team within your church, church council, your church staff, is to do a drive-by of your church. If you were to drive a block around your church, what are the things that you see? I want us to do that in the chat section for just a second. I want you to picture yourself like you're driving down the road, all right, and you don't have road rage. You're being a good person when you're driving. And what do you see that is around your church? One of the things that I see is this. What are some of the things that you see?
So Derek, Bob says he sees apartments and restaurants and shopping, and Lonnie said the same thing, basically for Trinity Hill. Mark says businesses, shops, churches, city hall, homes, etc.
Right.
Sharon shared that she recently shared her faith with a 60-year-old special needs gentleman, and that he accepted Christ, was baptized, and she wanted to know what are some tips for next steps for discipleship. And
Well,
then
that's a
Sharon
great
says she also
question.
sees small homes.
Small
Yeah,
homes
it's a
in a poor
great
community.
question.
Yeah.
And then there's a poor community. So mine would be Kentucky Wesleyan. College
Right.
is, of course, right across the street, as well as a neighborhood, um, you know, right behind the church. So both of those.
Awesome. And we'll get back to Sharon. We'll get to your question. I'll make sure be sure to answer that before our time is up. But one of the things I would ask about these areas that we've typed in is if your church didn't exist, would they know or would they care? I hope that they would know and they would care. Just as like if the places that we are in, the ponds that we individually go to, if we were to stop going to those, would people notice and would those be would it be affected in any way? One of the best ways for your church to have a deep impact in your community is to find some things that are just in your neighborhood and saying, how can we consistently be involved in those things that are just a stone's throw away from us, whether that's a local school or a park or apartments, as we've seen, or poor in the community. And it also tells us how we should be in ministry. One of the things that I also want you to consider is not just what are the things that are close to you, but I bet there are people in your community that like you but aren't worshiping with you. Let me say that again. They like you, but they aren't worshiping with you. These people at my church are people that are in our soccer league. They are people that come to our block parties. They are our Boy Scouts. They are the parents of our youth that don't come to church. They like us because we have provided a need and we have provided a niche maybe that they have needed filled, but they aren't currently worshiping with us and they aren't currently worshiping with other people. I would encourage your evangelism team or your church council to make a list of the people that like you but aren't currently worshiping with you and say, what can we do to specifically meet and reach these people because you're going to have your best success of reaching new people through those type of groups. Now, I want to say something that might make some of you mad. When it comes to reaching these groups, when it comes to reaching your pawns, and when it comes to reaching the list of people that you make, you have to be willing to bug the hell out of people. Now, I'm sorry if that offends you, but what I mean by that is you have to be consistent with people. And I always joke with my leadership team in one way or another. If you don't feel like you're bugging the hell out of someone, then you're probably not going to reach them. Now, why do I say this? Um, I send out text messages typically on a weekly basis to people that I invite to church. Now, when I send out these text messages, they are, it's probably the hardest thing that I have to do. I have to do. I have to send out these text messages, and it's hard because I feel like I'm annoying these people to death. But what I'm doing is I'm keeping them informed on what my church is doing. I'm constantly staying in front of them and reminding them of the opportunities that we have going on. It might be inviting them to a block party or inviting them to something fun that's going on at the church. And I've never had anyone tell me that to take me off their text list, for example. You constantly need to stay in front of people because it usually takes 7 to 10 invites for someone to respond to coming to something. 7 to 10 invites before they come. And when they come connected to you, one of the most important things that you can do with someone on their first time visiting or someone that you personally have invited is to connect them with someone else. Introduce them to someone else that they have something in common with, and then they can begin a conversation. So now it's not just their relationship is not just with you, their relationship is with this person that you have intentionally connected them with. I saw where someone asked me, they said, you are
Hey,
speaking of,
Derek.
yes,
Yeah, I was going to ask that question.
yeah. I saw where someone asked that am I speaking of non-church going individual? Yes, that I think honestly, I think it honestly I think we get a little bit hung up, and I could be wrong on this. I'm no Dave Kinnaman or true expert, but one of the things I think is really a mistake we make a lot of times is that we put people into categories, non-church going versus church going, and someone will say that they're a church going person if they go to church once a quarter. All right. If they go to church once every 4 months, they'll say, yes, I go to church. But I would say that you or I would say that person is really a non church going individual. I have very rarely had different strategies, I guess you could say, of approaching someone based off of church going or non church going. Uh, Basically, and this might be oversimplifying it, um, but people just want people to be normal. Going up and having a conversation with someone, developing that relationship, and then over time asking someone to come to church or sharing your faith with someone, sharing your testimony, and inviting them to come along. I think we can approach that over time in the same way that when we approach anybody, as opposed to church going versus non-church going. Now, I might be totally wrong on that, but that's just the way I have seen it over time. Over time work, but the goal and the key is consistency. One of the things that I've been blessed to do is to plant a church called River City. And we started planning this church about a year ago. And the amazing thing is that the people that started coming to this church, I have been working on for 3 or 4 years in Louisville in order to get them to come. So I want to encourage you that you might share your faith with someone, you might invite someone, and it's not going to be two or till 2 or 3 years down the road before they actually respond. And I want to encourage you to continue to do that with the people that like you, that aren't worshiping with you, the people that are on your lists, the people that are in your quote unquote pawns, and the people that you see as you do your drive-by assessments of your church. I want to get to some of the questions in just a second. I know I'm going to try to wrap up by 8 at the latest. But I also want to talk about a third aspect of evangelism. So we've talked about the individual. It's kind of the you know on the front line, and then I see the church as the second line, where we talk about how can our church be better in evangelism. But the third thing that I think we really need to focus on is reclaiming marketing as evangelism for our churches. The first visit that you will ever have someone go to is your website. If your church does not have a good website, be sure to look into that and make sure that you get one. People Google United Methodist Church, where whatever your city is, before they ever come. They're looking at what programs you have on your website before they ever come. In this day and age, your website is probably one of the most important things that you can invest money in. The other thing is social media. If you were to go to your church's social media page right now, what would you see? There are some churches that I've gone to their social media page, and it is a crying shame, because what they do is they share um, information that is internal. For example, they might share finance meeting is canceled today, or they might share quilters are quilting, or they might share that youth group is going to start at 7:30 instead of 7. And what this does is it totally turns off anyone that is not interested or that is not already involved in your church. The things that your social media should be focused on are what are some topics that people are interested in. Can you share articles? Can you share pictures from what your churches have been doing that might grab people's attention? Can you share media, videos of your last youth retreat or the last initiative that you all took on as a mission? Another thing that is greatly important is checking in on Facebook. You can set up your Facebook page so that people can check in to your church. One of the things that we do at River City is we say for every person that checks in, we're going to send $1 to a certain mission. This past Sunday, we said for every person that checks in, we will send $1 to Nothing But Nets. We had about 20 people check into our church that day. And when I went back and looked at each person's check-in, there were probably 10 or 15 people per check-in that liked it that we have never had any connection with before. And so what that does is that it tells the people to go and to check with their friend about going to church. If you have the money for this is still an effective form of media, in my opinion, based off what I have seen at Planning River City, and that's mailings. There is a great company called forhim.com. If you were to go to forhim.com and look on there, they do print media a lot cheaper than the United States Post Office. Now, the thing that it comes with print media is a lot of times what happens is when we share our faith, we do it once, no one comes from it, and so we give up on it. Well, the first time I did a mailer for River City, no one came. I wanted to stop because we spent like $1,500 on it, and I was frustrated about it. No one came, but we did another one. After that, four different families came, so we did another one. Six families came, and each of them came and said, "Hey, we got a few of your mailers, and we wanted to show up." Now, you might be sitting here saying, $1,500, that sounds like a lot of money, which it is a lot of money. But one of the things that I was convinced of is that if I can get one family out of doing a mailer for $1,500, chances are that one family would also it would be great to reach them, but also they would provide the giving units that would make up that $1,500. Also, in your communities, there are community newsletters. These are really good for kids events. There's a newsletter that we connect with in Louisville is called Macaroni Kid, and I think it's Macaroni Kid. Am I spelling macaroni right? MacaroniKid.com. And so anytime that we do a block party, a VBS, anything, we make sure that it's on that website, and we have many people show up from that. Also, every week in your every day, your local schools send home information to their um, uh, students, and we have found that local schools have been very welcoming to us sending things home with them for like block parties and not Vacation Bible School, but other event, fall festivals, trick or treat or trunk and treat or whatever the heck you call that thing. Um, they're very welcome to send those home, and we've had a very good turnout from those. But again, it's those things that we do over and over and over again that allow us to connect with them. Um, Finally, I would encourage you to, when you're connecting to these people, create a list. Create an Excel document that will allow you over time to create a mailing list that you can keep people in the loop with what's going on in your church. That you can mail them something for Easter, for Lent, for Advent, for Christmas Eve, all of these special events so that they are ready for you and you are ready for them. What questions do you have, and Tammy? What areas have I missed that and different questions that people asked?
Yeah, I think the only question we still need to address is Sharon's question about the special needs um, person that she has led to Christ or come to know Christ and baptized, and now wondering about next discipleship, steps in discipleship. And I think, you know, I think you, Sharon, I would just continue to have conversations with him about where he is, and um, it's hard to know, especially I don't know the extent of the special needs, but just to continue to have those conversations about where he is and helping him to understand, um, the relationship that God desires to continue to have with him. That it's not just about the salvation, but it's about ongoing relationship. And so I would just have continue to reach out to him and see what he is open to and able to participate in. Derek, do you have anything?
Yeah, I don't know specifically when it comes to working with people with special needs. What I can offer is typically when someone I've worked with gives their life to Christ, what I like to do is lead them through the book of John first, because it's his basic story of Jesus. There again, I don't know specifically your situation. So if there are some possibilities with that. There's a really good resource that I've used with youth called the 1 Minute Bible, which gives you a Bible lesson that you can go over in 1 minute. But I would have to, I think I think you would be better off suited speaking to someone that has specifically worked with someone with special needs, and I don't have that
Yep.
influence. I saw another a question about the block parties and things like that. Um, basically, I'm a big believer in consistent event-based ministry. The block party that I have thrown, basically was a barbecue cook-off. We had we're blessed at St. Matthew's to have a guy that cooks amazing barbecue. I think every church has one of those. Um, and also, we just got a bunch of inflatables and kind of created a scene. We sent about 2,000 pieces of paper home with different schools and put it on our on different Facebook advertisements and invited people to come through that. The key at those things is to do them consistently over time, specifically targeting those people that like you but maybe aren't worshiping with you yet. Because what you can do at those is strategically place your pastors, people in your congregation that are just bubbly, fun people to be around that can create relationships with people and talk to people. Um, and what I've seen as I've done those, I mean, literally for 5 years in Louisville, and it's taken 5 years to get to this point where we'll have the same people that come to VBS, will come to the block party, will come to Trunk and Treat, and by the fourth or fifth time that I see them, I'm able to say, "Hey, I've seen you at a lot of our events. I would love to have you come to worship." And again, it's that point where you become the church where they say, we go and party at that church, or we like to go and have fun at that church. So worship must be somewhat okay as well. And then they take that next step and come and worship with you there. So,
Yeah, and I would say y'all have done a good job at St. Matthew's in offering a variety of those consistent events. You talked about the Twice
mm,
Touch Clinic that y'all offer on a regular basis, as well as the barbecue, and then y'all have done Upward Soccer, isn't that right? And that has been another outreach, but it's consistent on a regular basis, and so I think it's just what you said is being intentional in what you're planning and why you're planning it, and doing it, on more than one occasion, in the sense that, you know, first time you probably didn't have as many people as you did, it 5 years later. And so often, if it's not a huge success the first time, then we tend to scrap it instead of looking at what are ways that we can
yeah.
improve upon it. Um,
I saw Lonnie's.
and Lonnie, that's a
Yeah.
good question about that.
Yeah, I saw that. Sorry, I
Yes,
was talking over you. Lonnie, the advice I'd give for
yes,
you on that is to connect with the family resource coordinator. Each school has a family resource coordinator that is provided by the state. And they are a lot of times in charge of what goes home with kids. Um, I would specifically focus, try to be as focused as possible. For example, I wouldn't send something home with them a lot, but if you're having an event that targets middle school students. If you're having a like a block party or a trunk and treat or an open gym night or something like that, and you could send something home with them about that, that'd be great. You also need to be really careful that you make sure that you send stuff home that is neutral. And what I mean by that is don't send something home that's, hey, we're gonna have a Bible study and figure out if we're going to heaven or hell. Don't send that home. Send home things that are almost first steps. So if you're doing something that is pretty much fun for the community, invite them to that. Because what I would hate to see happen is your relationship with the local school end because it almost seems like you're being a little bit too evangelistic and straightforward. So. But the family resource coordinator is definitely the way to go there.
Excellent. Well, Derek, thank you so much for sharing with us tonight about how we can be more intentional in our personal life as well as with our church and just in the community of how we can um, you know continue to evangelize and to share the good news that we know, and we want to share it in some effective ways. And I think what you said about this is we're running the marathon with this, and we want it to be the sprint, but often it is the long term relationships that we are building, and we just never know how God's going to use those to bring about what He's doing in the life of others. So thank you very much. We appreciate y'all, giving of your time on this Monday night to share with us, and had some great questions and great insight. We have our last webinar for the fall will be next Monday, and that's going to be Brian Ebel. He'll share our second part of evangelism. He's going to talk about hospitality in the church, and so. Yes, Lonnie, I can give y'all certificates. I can send those, and then we'll be in touch soon. So thank you very much.